2010. I'll just start with our regular survey that we always do. Hands in the air, please, for all of our newcomers tonight. How many people for the first Hive event? Fantastic. Thank you and welcome. For all of you that are new, the Hive is a not-for-profit organisation. Everything that we do is volunteered or kindly sponsored by our supporting businesses, which I'll mention in a moment. The Hive ethos is all about giving back to the community and linking the entrepreneurs of today with the entrepreneurs of tomorrow. So we have no barriers to entry. That's why we have free events every last Tuesday evening of the month. And we do our best to give you access to some really fantastic entrepreneurs that have great stories to tell at no cost. So you can come up and ask questions and get the most out of that. So on that note, I'd like to thank our sponsors that make this possible. Firstly, Greystone Bar that provides us with this space. And they're also responsible for the lovely food going around tonight as well, so please thank them. We've also got Clovelly Estate Wines who sponsor our speakers' gifts. We've got their banner here. And Lauren from Clovelly is also here tonight. I think she's hiding in the back corner over there in the seat, so please talk to her as well. Thank you, Clovelly. We also have a brand new local sponsor this month, and we'll be continuing through the rest of the year. A company by the name of Lucid Law. They're a fantastic law group that's brand new in Brisbane. Great if you want to talk to them about capital raising, IP, business setup and structure. So you can check them out at lucidlaw.com.au. And Carl can't be here tonight, but will be here from every other month. Just before we get into it, I'll thank our national sponsors as well that support our events in Melbourne and Sydney and our Brisbane events, who are Deloitte Digital and RMIT University in Melbourne. So without further ado, I'll get Tom up here so he can tell you the story. I've got all the boring stuff. A couple of quick notes on Tom. Tom left school at 15, found himself jobless at 23, founded Eagle Boys Pizza in 1987 and managed to grow that to Australia's largest privately owned pizza franchise. And there's lots of interesting and quirky bits in between in that story. I've read Tom's book and it's a fantastic read, but I'll let him fill you in on the rest of the story. So please welcome Tom Potter from Eagle Boys Pizza.
Okay, we'll get straight into the story and then straight into the questions afterwards. Just a bit of background on myself. I actually come from a very small country town in Victoria, and my family were fourth generation farmers, and when Dad was running the cannery and the farming business, it was taken over in a hostile takeover by a large public company back in the 80s or late 70s, and Dad lost the family fortune or the family business and was out of a job. So at the age of 45, he decided to go off into small business, and he opened up or bought an existing small soft drink factory in northeast Victoria in a place called Beechworth. And as kids we were driving up there pretty excited because Dad just bought a soft drink factory, as you can imagine. And he was explaining to us that we were going to be the third largest employer in town, in Beechworth. And we got up there, and we were the third largest employer in town. We had 9 employees. And the second largest employer in town was the jail. And the largest employer in town was the mental hospital. So Beechworth itself had 2,600 people, and it was a tough place to grow up. I was one of the lucky ones. At a very young age I knew what I wanted to do. I wanted to work in food. I loved working in the kitchen, and at the age of 15 I went off and I started my apprenticeship as a baker. And on the first day they took me down to the back of an oven, and this oven was enormous. In fact, the bakery I was working in was the largest industrial bakery in the southern hemisphere. And they pointed to a pile of bread tins and they said, just stack those on the conveyor, and then at the end of the shift you'll stack them back up again. There's 11,000 bread tins, and I stood there for the next 3.5 hours and I stacked them on the conveyor. I watched them go around for a couple more hours, then I stacked them back up again, and that was the entire job for the first 2.5 years working in this industrial bakery. And probably the best thing that happened was that the first job was the worst job. The day I finished my apprenticeship, they brought me into the office, they congratulated me. And for those of you that aren't aware, in 1983-84, when I finished my apprenticeship, the unemployment rate was running up about 16 to 17%, so they can pick and choose what they liked. So the day I finished my apprenticeship, I was sacked and sent on my way. I got the opportunity to, I got poached to go and play professional Australian rules football. And the first thing they did was they said, why don't we send you up to Northern Territory to spend a year up there and toughen you up. So they used to spend back-to-back years. You'd spend the season in Alice Springs and season in Darwin, and if you're any good they might have sent you off to Melbourne. And I was in Alice Springs playing football, and one of the fellas that I was playing football with said to me one day, what do you do for a living? And I said, well, I'm actually I'm a baker. And he said, oh, there's no bakery here in Alice Springs, we probably should go into business. And I said, well, what do you do? And he said, oh, I'm a motor mechanic. So what we did was we found that there'd been a bakery in Alice Springs that had closed, and we went off and found that it was going to cost us about $8,000 each to open up this bakery, and we put on our cleanest shorts and our best thongs, and we went off to the banks and we applied for our loans, and we couldn't get the money. So after a few months, we realised that there was another way to get money, and that was to apply for a car loan. So we gave the banks our phone numbers as references for jobs that we obviously had, and we went off and we applied for these car loans. And I got a car loan for about $6,000, and I scraped up the other $2,000, and we were in business, and that was our first business in Alice Springs. And what I did was I rode my push bike to work for the first few months at 2 o'clock in the morning, and then eventually got a motorbike. And I must say that after about 6 months we went from the first week of sales of about $2,000 to ultimately about $12,000 a week in sales, which was a lot of money back in the 80s. And for those of you that probably may be in business at a young age, when you're in living a long way away from your family and you've got a very successful business and you're extremely young and you've got a lot of cash, what do you think you actually do with it? Yeah, we actually pissed it all away, the whole lot. We had a great time. But after that 18 months up there, I packed up, I moved back to Melbourne, and it was a very interesting period. A lot of you probably weren't even born then, but in the mid-80s in Australia, it was boom time. And I was working for Coles Myer, setting up their bakeries, and I got to work with what was known then as Australia's largest company. Coles Myer were Australia's largest company, setting up their bakeries, and extremely arrogant, very, very difficult to work for, and they pushed their people around. I moved from them to work in the flour milling industry, and I worked for a company here based in Queensland called Defiance, and they would send me out to work in different businesses every week. Spaghetti factories, flour milling companies, bakeries, whatever it might be. And I came across the pizza industry. And what I found interesting about the pizza industry was it was new, it was untapped, and no one had got into the delivery business. And a fellow in Adelaide, who really put himself out as an entrepreneur, decided that he was going to open up his home delivery pizza business in Adelaide, and he called on me to come in and help advise, and off we went. So for the next 18 months I worked for him, and I ended up in Sydney helping run his operation. So we opened up in Sydney, and the first thing that I experienced was franchisees going broke. And I'd actually never experienced the raw emotion of people looking at you across the desk and saying, I'm losing everything, I'm losing my family, I'm having to take my kids out of school I can't afford, because this business that I bought, that you represent, is going backwards. And it was terribly difficult. I spoke with the boss, he flew in, and I advised him how bad things were, and he didn't want to hear about it. And I continued to probe him and say to him, we've got to fix this problem. And he continued not to want to hear about it, to the stage that we got into a toe-to-toe argument in the Sydney airport, and he advised me that he was an entrepreneur, and this is the way things are, and the cream always rises to the top, and people will go broke, and don't worry about it, it'll sort itself out. And as I continued to point out how bad things were,